There is a particular American ritual that begins the moment a hostess in black slacks leads you past a wall of wine bottles lit like museum relics, and it has almost nothing to do with hunger. It has to do with ceremony. Somewhere between the sizzle of a 500-degree plate and the quiet arithmetic of a $90 check. The steakhouse became one of the last places in American life where people still dress up to eat a piece of meat, and improbably. It became one of the most profitable rituals in the entire restaurant industry. Stay with me because the story of how a dining room full of red wine and porterhouses became a case study in capitalism itself is more fascinating than it has any right to be. Consider first the plain arithmetic of the restaurant trade, an industry that Adam Smith himself might have used as a cautionary tale. Margins hover near 3%. A majority of establishments do not survive 5 years, though the industry's own lobbyists, ever eager to soften the ledger, insist the real number is a gentler 17%. Whichever figure one credits, the underlying truth survives both estimates. This is a business built for failure, a Darwinian exercise dressed up in white tablecloths. And yet, amid this graveyard of ambition, one species of restaurant not only survives but dominates, occupying more than half of the 100 highest-grossing restaurants in the entire country. Year after year. That species is the steakhouse, and its secret is not innovation but the opposite of it, an almost religious devotion to sameness. Where the modern culinary world chases novelty, foam, fusion, the small plate reinvented weekly, the steakhouse has built an empire on repetition. The New York strip, the porterhouse. The wedge salad, the creamed spinach, the flourless chocolate cake. It is, in its way, a conservative institution in the truest sense, distrustful of change, confident that tradition itself is the product being sold. A diner who orders the filet tonight expects the same filet, on the same white plate with the same unhurried theater of service that he had a decade ago. Predictability in this narrow corner of American commerce is not a failure of imagination. It is the entire business model. And it is a lucrative one, because the steakhouse has quietly discovered something most industries spend fortunes trying to manufacture: a customer willing to pay without protest. A cut of beef that might run $50 is accompanied by a side of mashed potatoes that costs pennies to produce and $10 to purchase, a markup that would provoke outrage at a sandwich counter but draws no complaint whatsoever beneath chandeliers and white linen. Layer on a wine list built as much for display as for drinking, and you begin to see the outline of a business that has mastered the oldest trick in commerce, charging not for the ingredients, but for the experience of consuming them. But here is where the story becomes genuinely interesting, because for all its glamour, this is also one of the hardest businesses in America to grow. It cannot be franchised the way a hamburger can. It cannot be automated the way a fryer can. Its entire value proposition rests on human hands, human judgment, human hospitality, and human capital, as any economist will tell you, is the most stubborn kind of capital there is. That tension between opulence and scale, between tradition and growth, is about to take us into the boardrooms of 3 very different companies, each of which decided to solve that puzzle in its own way, and one of them did it by throwing the entire rulebook out the window. Before we get there, if stories like this, the quiet economics hiding behind everyday American institutions, are the kind of thing that keeps your curiosity lit. This is exactly the sort of territory this channel lives in, and subscribing means you won't miss the next one. Now to the 3 companies who took that same cut of beef and built 3 entirely different empires from it, starting with the one that refuses, even now, to compromise. Begin with the aristocrat of the trade, the steakhouse chain that behaves less like a restaurant company and more like a private club that happens to serve dinner. Its customer is not merely hungry. He is celebrating or closing a deal or simply reminding himself that he has arrived. The menu runs from $35 to $100, the beef is graded prime. And the steaks arrive on plates hot enough to keep sizzling audibly at the table, a small piece of theater that has become the chain's signature. More than 250 wines sit on the list, some running into 4 figures a bottle, because in this dining room the wine rack is not an afterthought. It is part of the architecture. The average guest walks out having spent roughly $90, a figure that has crept up from $70 over the past decade, not quite outrunning inflation, but healthy all the same. With beverages alone accounting for 1/5 of that total. And yet, for all that revenue, The company operates barely 150 locations worldwide, a footprint so modest that a chain of cheesecake restaurants alone claims more than double that number in North America. And a pancake chain claims 10 times as many. This is not timidity, it is philosophy. Where the fast food playbook prescribes rapid expansion through franchising, sign up anyone with capital and a pulse, collect the royalty check, and let someone else worry about the kitchen, this chain has resisted that temptation almost entirely. 90% of its revenue still comes from restaurants it owns and runs itself. Franchise royalties barely register on the balance sheet, a fraction of what a fried chicken franchise pays for the right to use a Colonel's face on its sign. The reasoning is almost old-fashioned in its caution. A brand built over 50 years on white tablecloth trust can be destroyed by a single underperforming franchisee far faster than it can be rebuilt. So the company grows at a crawl, 2 new restaurants a year, on average, treating every new location like an inheritance to be protected rather than a territory to be conquered. Even now, as its founding generation of loyal boomer diners ages out of relevance, the chain is courting millennials with fixed-price tasting menus and happy-hour cocktails. Careful experiments at the margins of a business that otherwise refuses to move quickly at all. Strip away the chandeliers, though, and the raw economics are staggering. A single location grosses roughly $5.5 million a year, more than double what a typical fast food restaurant pulls in. Ingredients eat up nearly a third of that, with beef alone consuming the largest single share, a cost that spiked brutally during recent years of drought and supply shocks. Labor and rent take another substantial bite, though tipped wages quietly shrink the burden. Servers working a $90 average check earn well above minimum wage on tips alone, which keeps turnover low in an industry famous for churn. What remains after all the overhead is an operating margin near 11%, nearly double the industry's average, and proof that opulence managed carefully is still one of the most profitable postures in American dining. But opulence is not the only way to sell a steak. Just down the road, in strip malls and suburban shopping centers across the country, a very different company looked at that same white tablecloth playbook and decided to burn it. Their entire pitch to America was startling in its bluntness. The same steak, none of the pretension, and a price so low it practically dared you to say no. That company did not just compete on price. It weaponized it, and in doing so, it built a restaurant empire that would outsell its aristocratic rival by a factor of 10. Picture a lodge built from southwestern timber, neon signs buzzing over a jukebox, buckets of peanut shells crunching underfoot, and country music drifting through a dining room where the average check barely clears $20. This chain made no secret of its strategy, stating it plainly in its own filings. It would match or beat any competitor's price in any market without apology. Here, a 6-ounce sirloin with 2 sides costs less than $14, and even the largest bone-in cut on the menu rarely tops $30, accompanied always by an unlimited basket of warm rolls and cinnamon butter that has become as much a part of the brand as the beef itself. This is not fine dining pretending to be humble. It is humble dining that has made peace with exactly what it is. The quality reflects the price. Some cuts fall below the grade served at the aristocratic steakhouse down the road, and nobody pretends otherwise. But nobody walks through those doors expecting excellence either. They come for volume, for value, for the sensation of getting more than they paid for, a tolerable steak elevated by good bread and cheap theater into something that feels, for $20, like a genuine night out. And the strategy has worked spectacularly. This chain grew from roughly 270 locations to well over 600 in a decade, nearly tripling revenue to almost $3.5 billion a year, almost entirely from restaurants it owns outright rather than franchises. Yet volume alone tells only half the story, because a single location here grosses under $4 million a year, comfortably less than its high-end counterpart, and profit margins, while respectable at 8%, never approach the 11% enjoyed by the aristocrats of the trade. Cheap ingredients bought in bulk turn out to cost nearly the same proportionally as the prime beef served across town, because beef is beef. And its price has climbed relentlessly for everyone regardless of grade. The lesson here is almost philosophical. Low prices buy volume, but volume does not automatically buy prosperity. It buys scale, which is a different thing entirely, and a considerably harder one to convert into lasting profit. And then there is the cautionary tale. the largest steakhouse chain in the entire world by location count. An empire built in the 1990s on deep-fried onions and manufactured Australian charm, now reduced to something closer to a punchline than a destination. Sales have flatlined near $2 billion a year for the better part of a decade. Restaurants have quietly shuttered by the dozen annually since 2016, and the only genuine bright spot left burns. Oddly enough, on the other side of the world, where South Korean diners have embraced the brand with an enthusiasm nobody entirely predicted or fully understands. What all three of these companies prove together is that there is no single way to sell a steak in America, only a set of trade-offs between prestige and scale, between margin and volume. That every one of them has answered differently. The aristocrat protects its brand at the cost of growth. The value chain trades quality for sheer reach, and the fallen giant shows what happens when a company loses its grip on both. Even against titans like the world's biggest fast food franchises, the modest steakhouse, slow-growing, stubbornly human, resistant to automation, still manages to outturn nearly everyone on a per-location basis. A quiet, uncomfortable reminder that in American business, the old-fashioned and the inefficient sometimes beat the modern and the scalable at their own game. If this kind of story, the hidden economics behind something as ordinary as a steak dinner, is the sort of thing you want more of, I'd genuinely love to hear which one surprised you most. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.